It's John chapter 11, verses 1 to 44, and it's entitled The Death of Lazarus. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him."
On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, but many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of blind men have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odour, for he's been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hand and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes, let him go." May God bless his word to us. Thank you.
Did you know that when they were released in 1918 at the end of the First World War, Bassett's jelly babies were originally called peace babies? This is a limited edition version that they released, I think, in 2018 for the centenary. I have an empty packet filed away in my filing cabinet somewhere next door, but I decided a picture was probably just as good because it's bigger and you can see it. They were a celebration and a marking of the new peace that had broken out. I read a rumour yesterday that the different colours may have represented the different countries who fought in the war, but I haven't really been able to confirm that. However, as we know, peace didn't last too long, and as unessential items, their production swiftly stopped in the Second World War due to the shortages. And when they returned in 1953, they came back as jelly babies. This might seem like a little bit of a trivial fact for you, and to a certain extent it is, but sweets weren't so trivial back then as they are now. Now they are widely available in all sorts of varieties, but when they were launched, Peace Babies shared a message. They showed that life was returning to normal and that life could be fun again. There is also a nice link here to the sweetness of peace. During the war, our mouths were prevented from knowing too much sweetness. I'm using the term "we" to encompass us all, but of course, not all of us remember quite back that far. But we remember. We remember those days where we were prevented from enjoying the sweetness of freedom, the sweetness of peace, but were forced instead to endure something else. I'm not quite sure I want to say that everything that people ate back then was bitter, but it was certainly overshadowed. And eating was a lot more functional than perhaps it is today. It was more about inputting enough calories to stay alive rather than about enjoying food. There certainly wasn't too many fine dining experiences available while we were at war. I don't think, anyway. Anyone want to correct me? No. Good. Lazarus was ill. Jesus didn't rush to be by his bed, didn't snap his fingers to make him well straight away. Rather, he waited. And he waited to reveal the sweet truth that faith in God would make sure that death and pain did not get the last word. Jesus does not promise us life free from suffering and pain, but offers us the promise that in eternity it shall not dwell with us. It has no place alongside us. Mary, Martha, the disciples, and every other friend of Lazarus still had to go through the pain, loss, and grief of losing Lazarus. Jesus had to go through the dangerous path back to the place where he had been threatened with stoning. All to share a sweet realization that death and pain did not win, that they did not get the final word, but that God could and will raise all those who have faith in him to eternal life. This is a promise that we must remember as we seek peace, as we seek God's kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven. Peace is not an easy path to take. Peace doesn't simply happen, just like love doesn't just happen. We must work at it to keep it alive and well. With this promise that pain and suffering does not win, and that it is only temporary, we should be assured that we can stand up for what is right, that we need not be afraid of pain or loss, but rather look to, as we remember, the sweet reminders of Jesus of what is to come, of what we are working towards, and what we shall inherit. Sometimes that can be difficult. Sometimes the sweet reminders seem few and far between, or off in the distance, a very long way away. So if today you're sat there thinking that you are in one of those times where you're waiting for God to remind you of something better, to remind you of the promise that something else is coming, know that he has not forgotten you. Know that God has not forgotten this world either. Remember, God is faithful. There is something else that I was reminded of while I was speaking. I think it was to Pat the other day, reminded of in this, that in his resurrection, Lazarus was restored to his community. I think the words you used, Pat, where he was remembered. He was once again, which we often short to remembered, made a member of the community in which he lived. He was once again made a member of his family, his friendship group, the world. He was restored to a life with others. One of the greatest sadnesses of war and death is that of isolation, of dividing ourselves off from others, of thinking that those that have died are alone, or feeling alone because they have left us. But this is another slight trick of pain and loss. Because the sweet promise of Jesus is that we too will be remembered, restored to community and life with one another. This is once again something that I think Peace Babies or Jelly Babies can help to remind us of. Because they're not all the same colour, the same flavor or the same shape. They belong to a community. They enjoy being with one another. In fact, Bassets have given each different colour a name and backstory. I won't go into the backstories now, but you can go and research those later if you want to. But let's see if you can guess what colours these names belong to. So the first name is Brilliant. What colour do you think might be called Brilliant?
Red.
Red. Strawberry. Absolutely. Brilliant red. Okay. What about Bubbles? Sorry? Blue. There's no blue jelly baby. Not green. Not pink. Not white. Not orange. Yellow. Yellow, or the lemon flavour, absolutely. Okay, you might get this one a bit easier. What about Baby Bonnie? Pink. Gender stereotypes, well and truly there on that one. What about Boofles? He's the clumsy one. You're all scared to guess now. He's green. Big Heart is purple or blackcurrant, and Bumper is orange. Each of these is needed for a packet of jelly babies. Each of these is an important part of the community that they make, the peace that they represent, the sweetness that they share. And at the end of war, one of the sweetnesses that we find, or we hope for, is of communities coming back together, of people dwelling next to each other without fighting or arguing, loving one another once again. It is a difficult task, and often one that we might think is impossible. But I want to invite us to watch another video in just a moment from another chaplain in another country who will tell us that it is, in fact, possible.
My name is Padre Joe Mairara, and I'm the chaplain for the NFS HQ that is based here in Normandy Barracks, Sanalaga, Germany. Remembrance is an important time in a year for all who believe in the power of peace, both civilian and military. A moment to pause and remember our brave men and women who selflessly gave their lives for their country in some of the dark moments in human history in order to achieve global peace. Peace is an expensive goal to achieve. It costs lives, time, and resources. Jesus once said in John's Gospel, chapter 15, verse 12 to 13, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. No greater love that is greater than this, for one to lay down one's life for his friends." I was posted to Germany last year. In our Remembrance Parade, it was packed with people from both the British community, expats, and German as well. Remember, these are the two countries who fought each other in the First and Second World War. They were the descendants of these two great countries. Because of the power of peace, love, and tolerance, we are able to commemorate the lives of our fallen together in the same place, serving the same God with love and understanding. Remembrance is not only about thinking of our fallen heroes, it also calls us to task, to make things better, to change the present, hopeful for the future for all of us. May our remembrance this year, as we remember the lives of our fallen heroes, not only to be a memorable one, but also keep reminding us of our common responsibility to make the world today more peaceful tolerance, and full of love. Thank you.
Last week, at the prayer vigil for the Middle East, I read a reflection prepared by people in Palestine that clearly stated that peace does not just happen. It is not the default, but rather requires work from us all. To, like Jesus, be ready to love everyone. To lay down our lives, not just for our friends and family, but also to be prepared to lay aside our own self-interests for the common good. It recognized that giving peace made us vulnerable, and that receiving peace from others was also a vulnerable thing to do. Whilst we must all be wise in the vulnerabilities that we share, we are encouraged and equipped to make ourselves vulnerable to one another. For it is only in making ourselves vulnerable that we can truly know the love of others. That we can truly know that we are accepted and loved for who we are. In making ourselves vulnerable, we give people the opportunity to take advantage and to hurt us, and yet many don't. Many show us love and compassion. If we do not allow ourselves at times to be vulnerable in the right ways and places, we do not allow peace to grow. We do not allow love to grow. Jesus made himself vulnerable by returning to a place where he had been threatened. Mary and Martha make themselves vulnerable in declaring their faith in Jesus and in God. How do we make ourselves vulnerable before God and before one another? And how do we make ourselves vulnerable with people that we haven't yet met, that we don't know? In recent weeks and months, I have been aware of the need to make myself vulnerable with you, to let myself be known. It's done bit by bit, not all at once. But without it, we couldn't build relationship. We couldn't build life together. We couldn't build church or share the love of Jesus. We must remember, as we follow Jesus, to walk humbly and to love justice. And I've forgotten the other one, it's gone out of my head. Walk humbly, love justice, and act justly, have mercy. Thank you. Walk humbly, have mercy, and act justly. So what happens when I go away from my script? Sorry, Rachel? And make yourself vulnerable. Absolutely. We must remember all of those things that I've just said and that you've just reminded me of. I'm not going to try again. And as part of that humility, to recognize that we don't know everything, that there is much more to Jesus and God than we yet know. We must have mercy on others as they too encounter the fact that they do not know everything. And together we must act justly, acknowledging that we, between us, don't know everything, and together are seeking truth and are seeking God and peace. And so as we remember today, let us remember our common responsibility, as Joe shared with us just now, to make the world more peaceful, tolerant, and full of love. And may we do that as we sing our next hymn, number 707, Make Me a Channel of Your Peace.